It's been about 2 years since I've shared before, so it's nice to put a bow on it again and present it in hopes that at least one person might be enriched by it. I've done a lot of work in therapy, so I'll be making therapy-related comments regarding the types of mental health issues I accumulated over the years and what I've worked on in sobriety. And perhaps you'll find some similarities not only in our drinking, but in our mental health struggles that contributed to it. I'll also share 4 what I call inherent superpowers that I discovered were already inside of me before I got sober. I just had to learn how to use them. Trigger warnings for mentions of sexual abuse, suicidal ideation and attempts, and death. Here we go. I was born in Arkansas in 1970. I remember bell-bottoms, skateboards, bicycles, all things Batman, Star Wars, listening to music. I loved laughing. I loved baseball, driving movies, and hanging with my cousins. My younger sister and I were close. Our parents loved us very much, and all in all, I had a happy childhood. Both of my parents were educators. My mom taught special needs children, and my dad moved from being a teacher to vice principal while also serving as a lieutenant in the Army. He's now a retired colonel. As you can imagine, his training made him a strict disciplinarian. That, coupled with the trauma he endured as a child from his own parents. A little therapy side note, the effects of strict parenting on those of us that had them as kids: anxiety, depression, aggression, anger issues, low self-esteem, rebellion, no accountability for actions, poor coping skills. So these are already building up in us, those of us that had at least one strict parent, as toddlers and preschoolers. Not to mention PTSD depending on the severity of the discipline. So I had that going for me. Yet I remember absolutely loving being around both my parents. My parents were into martial arts. My sister and I started Taekwondo when we were each 6. We went camping, fishing, swimming all over Arkansas. Education was important. Both my parents got master's degrees and urged us to take school seriously. They didn't have to urge me much, though. I loved academics. I was good at art early on, loved math and science, but I also loved nature. I knew everything there ever was to know about dinosaurs and birds. I could name them all. The Triceratops was my favorite dino, and I could name most all local birds by the time I was in kindergarten. Christmases were storybook, nothing but beautiful memories of holidays. We went to church, had family reunions every year, and I still drive by my childhood home sometimes and get lost in the memories. My parents are weirdos, normies, so no substance abuse was absent in our house. I don't know where they got that gene. In 1980, my father was assigned to Army duty in Vicksburg, Mississippi, so off we went. New school, homesick, 5th grade. Enough said. We adapted though. My sister and I both became national Taekwondo champs and were heavily involved in school activities. I graduated with honors, got full rides to college, and eventually went to grad school for a master's in immunology and pathology. I worked in a research lab and then became a biology teacher and department chair at the state math and science school. I was married at 23. We bought our first home at 26, had our son at age 30, and life was seemingly wonderful on the outside. Inside, I was very much operating from the perspective of a wounded boy. At 9, I was sexually abused by both a male and female older cousin, just a few weeks apart. A therapeutic side note on sexual child abuse. This can change the way a child sees the world. It can become distorted, can create mistrust, fear, betrayal, self-identity issues, relational harm, and isolation. So now I've got all these things going on by the age of 9. That was my introduction to sex, betrayal, and the general cruelty of the world. I never told a soul until my late 30s. As hard as moving to Mississippi was, though, I figured at least no one would have to know what happened to me. I could be an all-new kid. And I do remember having part of me that was happy, but was burdened with carrying around this other part that was just so damaged and scared and confused. I cried a lot as a kid, and I would console myself inside my head when I was alone. It didn't usually last very long, though. But that little voice, it stayed around, insisting I was okay. It didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it at the time, but I always suffocated that voice with shame. But it was the voice that would eventually save me. That was my voice of reason. My higher self, the one that knows better, the one that knows all my secrets and all my truths. That quiet voice that became the loud voice. It became the voice. But it was also the voice I beat down the most back then. That part of me knew I had purpose. It knew I was enough, but none of the other parts believed it. They had just not believed it since, that thing when I was 9. When a child's hurt by those who are supposed to protect him, he no longer feels safe or worthy of love, and no longer believes that good things are going to happen to him in the future. I remember sadness and somehow thinking I deserved it, embracing it even. But ironically, as destructive as those beliefs and attitudes were, they were trying to protect me in their own way. Don't expect anything good and you'll never be disappointed again. Don't trust anyone and you'll never be hurt again, Shane. These are, in fact, logical conclusions based on prior experience. And so this is my inherent superpower number 1. All parts of me, in some fucked up way, are trying to protect me. I can use that. I can embrace it. I just got to know, I got to get to know the voices and what their fears are. My intro to alcohol was at age 13, Milwaukee's Best, the Beast. Behind the movie theater, I grabbed a hot one out of some dude's trunk just like everyone else. I popped it open, I chugged it, and I threw it up. But that piss water gave me a spinning pinwheel in the middle of my forehead. That buzz that began between my eyes and enveloped me was like a blanket. It was like, as many people have said in recovery, the greatest feeling I'd ever felt. I sought it out whenever I could, always surrounded by friends doing the same. By senior year, I was chugging cases of beer on the weekends and graduated to bourbon by 17. Got my first DUI at 19 and had no idea my drinking was a problem. My getting caught was a problem. As a young adult, I was smart, successful, and my friends and I glorified drinking and the antics. My entire identity was around drinking. But still, I remember sitting on my porch swing with my wife and my infant son and my dog and just feeling very proud about the life that we had built together. Inside, though, I was unraveling. My marriage and career crumbled as my drinking increased, and by age 32, I had a record, I was divorced, living in a 900 square foot apartment, and wondering how I lost it all so quickly. A therapy side note on being arrested. In addition to the obvious, the stigma, the employment problems, and etc., arrest can cause anxiety, PTSD, nausea, high blood pressure, and so on. And this is shit that I brought on myself, so now I've got that guilt to deal with in addition to the original trauma. So any of you that have been arrested, you've got that to work with as well. My first suicide attempt was at the age of 32. Xanax and whiskey. Thankfully it didn't work, and I was able to get back on my feet, working in various sales jobs and eventually agreeing to manage my mother's rapidly growing health insurance company. My family and I also began a nonprofit organization that focused on employing and mentoring men and women on parole and probation. Now fast forward to age 37, I was freshly divorced for the second time. I was a girl dad now to my newborn daughter and fully immersed in being the non-custodial parent for both of my kids. A recent study in the Journal of Men's Health found that men and women divorcees suffer higher rates of mortality, depression, illness in general, and substance abuse. So more fuel for the drinking fire. By then I had my second DUI and I fretted about child support payments and when I could see my kids. I made enough money, but I squandered it. Booze came first and the fucking electricity could wait. My family and I continued serving prisoners and parolees, and although it was all volunteer work, it was the most fulfilling thing I did with my time outside of dadhood. Although I drank to oblivion every night, I taught inmates how to succeed in reentry to society. I related to them through arrests and their addictions and encouraged them to seek sobriety. I helped hundreds, sat on parole hearings with them, visited them in remote county jails, reached out to their families and helped their transition. We fed and clothed thousands of homeless across our state. I felt like God used me to make a difference, and the deal I made with Him was, as long as I'm serving you and others, my drinking is fine. Hell, it's necessary for me to carry all those burdens for the people that I serve. My health did begin to decline, though, and I just kept it to myself. By my late 40s, I was drinking up to a handle of tequila a day, and somehow managing the family business and the volunteer work to the best of my hungover abilities. I tell you one thing I did, and I did it well. I drank at all costs. I drank through the marriages and then the divorces. I drank through all the failures and the wins. No matter what, I drank. I did manage to be a regular fixture in my kids' lives, and there towards the end, all I cared about was trying to be a happy dad in front of them until I died. And think about how bold that is, to choose something illogical, financially irresponsible, goes against the wishes of your family, goes against your own health and well-being, yet you boldly choose it because you're convinced that drinking and its consequences are more tolerable than the thoughts of actually dealing with this shit life. As a drinker, I drank at all costs, but this is my inherent superpower number 2. Because listen, if I believe something is best for me, I will do it at all costs. My decades of drinking, despite losing everything, are a testament to that. Now, I don't drink at all costs. I should be dead became something I said a lot, if not out loud, then in my head for sure. Whether thankfully like, whew, I should be dead, or angrily like, why can't I just fucking die? I thought of death all the time. In the summer of 2016, I tried suicide again. More pills, more liquor, only to wake up to cops, paramedics, my parents, and my anger. 2 stints in forced rehab were my only real attempts to quit drinking, but they were short-lived. I was this ball of joy and pain, finding purpose when I was helping someone or with my kids and family, but always feeling alone. In the middle of a crowded room, I was alone. And going inside myself for comfort was no longer safe. I became bitter and broken. I hurt everyone, as is the case with any grenade, when it goes off, it hurts the ones around you closest the most. I drank over my old regrets while simultaneously and daily creating fresh, new regrets. I lived in shame. I stopped believing I was loved. I believed with every fiber of my being that I was more of a burden than a blessing. I hated myself. In 2016, I had to go to the doc, and he told me if I continued to drink, I would die within 5 years. All my numbers were just off the charts. And I was the only one in the room when he told me that, and I ran from that doctor like a deer in a forest fire. But 5 years later, just as he predicted, my body began to shut down. And one night in August of 2021, I ran to the bathroom to vomit blood for about the 10th time that day. This had been going on daily for years now. And I remember my kidneys hurting so badly I wanted to scream. I could feel the right lobe of my liver protruding through my abdominal wall. When I clutched my torso, I hated myself louder and harder than I ever had. Prior to that moment, my head pounded with hate. But for some reason, that's when I heard that little voice in me that wanted to live. It's got to stop, it said. I heard it louder. I heard it louder than ever. I thought, go figure, I do want to live. So I went back to the doctor 2 days later. This time I took my dad alongside for accountability. This visit was different. The doctor's message was final. He assured me I would die soon. But more importantly, after years of watching me kill myself, he said that if I took one more drink, he would no longer be my doctor. I have patients who want to live, Mr. Wilbanks. I need to focus on them. But I found I was ready to hear it. Hell, I was hoping for it. I just hadn't admitted it yet. He told me he needed me sober for 6 weeks to get accurate test results, and this was on the 17th of August. My birthday was in 2 weeks on the 31st, so I looked over at Dad and I was like, I can do that. We got in the car, and I was like, all right, Dad, here's what we're going to do. You can go ahead and head to the liquor store. I'm going to drink my ass off. Hang on, somebody's calling me, of course. Am I still there? Okay. I'm going to drink my ass off for the next 2 weeks, balls to the wall, and then I'm going to quit. On September 1st. That's exactly what I did. I stocked up the liquor cabinet. I invited all my drinking buddies to come enjoy their last drinks with me. I had impromptu parties, all alone or with friends, whichever I could get, and I drank. Something I didn't realize, though, was my pilot light was lit again, that night in my bathroom and later in the doctor's office. Each day as I grew closer and closer to my birthday and quitting date, closer and closer to my very last drink, small parts of me were steadily getting on board with this idea of complete, honest, real sobriety. So much so that by 8 p.m. on the night of my birthday, after everyone else had left, except for my son, I looked over at this 21-year-old man, my boy, the one who had first-handedly suffered the most extensive damage from my drinking, and I said, Noah, I think I'm done. Let's call it a night. I'm ready to get started. He looked at me and smiled, just as my dad had done in the car on the way home from the doctor's office, and just as others had done when they heard I was going to quit drinking. I hope so, was the expression. 6:18 the next morning, September 1st, 2021. I think my alarm may have been set for 6:30 or 7, but it didn't matter. I got some sleep, but it was that nervous, kid on Christmas Eve, that night before a big competition kind of sleep. I was looking forward to it. I remember planning, strategizing even all night. I was planning the execution of Drunk Shane. I was planning the funeral of my drinking life. And I had no fucking clue what I was about to get into. I had quit before, 2 weeks here, 30 days there challenge. I poured out liquor, bought more the next day. I used to pray in the shower through tears and true intentions to please let me stop this, only to later find myself making fun of that stupid, weak, mourning version of Shane. The one with the tears and the hopes and the fears. Boo-hoo, motherfucker, I'd say at 5 p.m. We're drinking our way through this one again. But that is my inherent superpower number 3, because I'm in control. I can hear all of the voices in sobriety, not just the loudest ones. I know that the quiet ones can be the ones that save me. If I can hear them all, I can differentiate between them, and I can even assign them priority. I'm in control. On day 68 of my sober walk, Monday, November 8, 2021, I was invited to TLC by a dear sober friend. I heard Eric read the 9 things, and I cried my pain out onto the floor. But those first 2 months, holy shit, I'm honestly thankful I white knuckled my way through them. Everything triggered me. But I found some strength. That my first true triumph I felt in the early days was after reaching for a soda in a gas station cooler and just being frozen in fear. All I could see was beer. From that day forward, I asked my family members to drop off seltzer while I sat in my bed, binge watching Breaking Bad in the office and eating Skittles by the handful. That was my first trigger, or at least the first one that got my attention. But even then, with no community, I began to see the powers within me that would allow me to maintain the sobriety. I became overly protective of my mood, which I knew would impact my desire to drink. Technically, I should say I was protecting my sobriety, but in reality, I didn't even know what the hell that was yet. I had to protect my mood. I quickly began to discover who and what set me off. And when it set me off, whether it was an inanimate object, a song, or some other emotional trigger, or even a beloved human being, I invited it or them to leave. And once I got to TLC, I turned to my new friends when triggered. Shout out to my buddy Mark. I can't go into that story now, but thank you, Mark. Life's not better now because it got better. It's because I can handle it better. I can live it better. I've had some big moments, concerts, sporting events, vacations, all sober, all with my kids, but for me, it's the little things. Answering a phone call from my son one night after his shift, talking about his broken heart, talking for hours and laughing and crying together. Or having coffee with my 16-year-old daughter every other Tuesday. I catch myself in awe as I watch her mannerisms live and in person. I'm not suffering through a hangover or thinking about my next drink or hoping she can't smell the booze. I often fight back tears when she tells me about school or work because I get to experience how amazing she is. Getting called to my parents at 1 a.m, just sitting with them while one of them is in pain and the other's worried. To my niece, I'm now her funkle, not her drunkle. These little things, she came up with that, the funkle part. These little things that get me by though, day to day. And I say the same 4 words 1,000 times a week to myself. You prayed for this. Meaning where I stand now is the hallowed ground I thought I'd never see. I think people in recovery don't get enough credit for the constant moment-to-moment battles that we face and win all the time. All the time. Not being an asshole 14 different times in one day is a fucking win. It's 14 wins, actually. Not letting today's reactions become tomorrow's regrets is a win. That's my inherent superpower number 4. Not the ability to feel the feelings, it's the ability to pause the response. I don't have to respond to anything immediately. I'm stronger than that. We're stronger than that. We can respond with grace and poise and wisdom. We can be in control of our emotions and our responses. That first response to a trigger is physiological, out of our control. But then after you feel your heart beating faster or your temperature rising or that bead of sweat, that's when the big you steps in. You blink, you pause. You can't stop their words from coming, but you can control what you do next. Remember that old saying, everything's a nail to a hammer? Don't just be the hammer. Don't just use the hammer. There are other tools, other paths, other outcomes, and you'll find them if you look. In my first year of sobriety, I changed my mind about, left, or declined social events altogether. I traveled around the country on my terms. I met TLCers in real life. I was reminded that I matter, for those of you that know what that is. I found that some people will forgive you quickly if they see you've truly changed. And I stayed sober that year because that was my only objective that year. Head down, just do the damn thing. In my second year, my daughter exited my life for a whole year. It was painful. I shared it here. I gave her space, and I stayed sober every day just in case she came back. And one day she did. I was there. I was sober. I was present. I got to feel all that. And we're doing better than ever now, Annabelle and I. My objective that second year was just to get to know myself, and holy shit, did I. And at the beginning of my third year, I was a month or two into my brawl with cancer. I had stage 4 colon cancer and stage 3B bladder cancer. I was scared, I was alone in many ways, but I wasn't without community. My church community prayed for me, they visited me, and they left me alone when appropriate. And my TLC community, man, y'all came together, you prayed for me, sent me all kinds of things, prayed over this blanket, sent me this healing blanket that I treasure now. They knitted me beanies, thank you, Kent. Sent me gifts, texts, phone calls, DoorDash gift cards, love and encouragement. I had 22 months of tools accumulated and available when I got that diagnosis. Sitting in my car alone, the first place I went was inside myself, without thought or effort. I went into the safest place for me now. Me. That's the me. Shit, I'll get through this. That's the me that was 22 months sober and grounded and strong as fuck. My family rallied, kept me strong, and I handled it. I went inside myself time and time again as I fought that shit. Lost about 80 pounds. Things got bleak. I was forced to look at death and all that comes with it, but then I started feeling strong. Let's fucking go became my battle cry. LFG. And finally on November 7th, I was given the all clear sign. Now, over a year after my diagnosis and a much lighter me, I'm literally in the best shape I've ever been in. My dog, Robin, went through my cancer with me, and now she will live her entire life in a sober home. Today, I'm 1,095 days sober. Tomorrow's 3 years. Since getting sober, I paid off $15,000 in child support arrears. And I improved my credit and was able to buy my daughter a car and take off some of the burden from her mother. I remain cancer free, and despite the shit life throws now and again, I'm one happy cat. My new mantra is not, I should be dead. It's, I should be and am alive. I'm supposed to be here. This is what I'm supposed to be. A man people can count on or turn to. A dad who loves his kids so much and can actually presently show it now. A son who is strong and reliable, comforting and trustworthy. A brother and uncle and cousin and friend you're just damn glad to have. And hopefully an effective substance abuse counselor. To wrap up, for those of you struggling or new, whatever day of your walk today is for you, it's another day one, W-O-N. You're alive, you're here in the right place. You've probably hit what at least one person in your life would characterize as your rock bottom. DUIs, jail, divorce, lost jobs, lost friends, lost custody, lost freedom. That was your physical or circumstantial rock bottom. I hit that rock bottom in 2016, but after rehab, I didn't think there was anything redeemable left in me. I didn't quit drinking then. Instead, I just sat on rock bottom for another 5 fucking years, just waiting to die, numb. I could not for the life of me quit drinking for myself because I was worthless to me. But when I faced death again in 2021, I thought about my kids. It was sad that their dad was an alcoholic, but it'd be much worse if he died from it. So I got up and got sober for them until I could love me some me. Now I stay sober for me. However it happens, you have to decide. You have the power in you now to decide when it becomes real. You say it enough because you've had enough. This fluid, this liquid in a bottle with a lid sitting on a shelf has no power over you except what you give it when you walk over to it and pick it up and open it and drink it. You also have the power not to. 1 year from now, will you just be 1 year older? Or will you be 1 year sober? You could be. If not now, when? Today, I'm happy to be able to present to you the best version of Shane that I've ever known. Thank you for listening.